Hey everybody, welcome to another Games That Annoy Me to No End. This one doesn't outright infuriate me, but it's definitely very annoying. This is Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures. You may not have known that Pac-Man got a sequel, but it did, and it was in a completely different genre than the original game. This is technically a side-scrolling point-and-click adventure game. It's a very weird one, and I'll describe more about that in a moment. But obviously this was developed and published by Namco back in 1994 for SNES and Genesis. What you're seeing here is the Genesis version, or Mega Drive for those of you who aren't in North America, although this particular game I don't think actually got released outside of North America on the Genesis, so Genesis would be appropriate for this one. Anyway, console naming semantics aside, what exactly are we dealing with here and why is it so annoying? Well, the original Pac-Man is an arcade classic. Basically, everybody knows what Pac-Man is. Pretty much everybody who is into gaming at all has played at least some version of Pac-Man, and it has been an enduring classic for a reason. It's simple, it's easy to pick up and play, and it has that classic arcade game loop of just see how far you can go in with however many quarters you have and try to keep the number of continues as low as possible in order to get the highest score that you can. That's not what Pac-Man 2 is, however. Pac-Man 2 is a very weird point-and-click style game, which is weird to put on a console that used a D-pad anyway, but they go a bit further than simply being an odd genre for the platform in question. You see, unlike most point-and-click adventure games where you're basically controlling the actions of the character, in this particular case, you are not actually in control of Pac-Man. Pac-Man is in control of himself, and you are capable of doing one of three things. The first of them is shooting things with a slingshot. You shoot a rock at something, it catches his attention, or it has some effect on the environment, and you go from there. The second thing is you can tell him to look in a specific direction, of course noted by the D-pad, and then he'll look in that direction. If there's something there, he might interact with it. And the third thing you can do is launch a power pellet. You can have up to 3 power pellets at any time, and whenever you launch one out, once Pac-Man picks it up, he turns into Super Pac-Man and starts flying around the stage, and if the ghosts are on screen, which is normally why we would do something like this, then he will eat the ghosts and they'll go off and end up respawning later. So those are your 3 interactions. The start button just brings up the inventory screen, which shows you how many power pellets you currently have, which is completely redundant because you already have a display on the main interface that shows you how many power pellets you have. You have the display of how many ID cards you've picked up, which are basically just keys, so they let you into certain areas. There's a spot for the train ticket and a spot for the ropeway ticket, which just lets you use those things. And then there's a spot for whatever objective you're going for in the given level that you're on. This game does take place in a sort of level format where, unlike in, say, a point-and-click adventure game where you would just go on a general adventure and you would just be solving puzzles and gradually have to save your game manually, here there is no saving of the game, because it's a Genesis game or an SNES game, and that really wasn't a common thing unless it was a particularly long game, like, say, a JRPG or something like that. No, this was an era when passwords were still a thing, so when you got past the level, then you would be given a password that you could use to get back to that point of the game. Things start off very simple. The first thing you need to do is get a bottle of milk. It's extremely easy to do, it just gets you acclimated to the controls, more or less. Then the next thing you need to do is go to the mountain and get a mountain flower for a character named Lucy's birthday, and so you go and do that, and it has a bit more complicated puzzle solving, as well as the hang glider sequence, which is really just avoiding obstacles the entire time. And then after that, the ghosts actually start getting involved in shenanigans by stealing Pac Jr.'s guitar, and you have to go get it back. And it's somewhere between the mountain flower and the guitar stage that I just give up on the game entirely every single time I have tried to play this thing. I've never finished it, and I probably never will, because frankly, it is incredibly annoying. It's bad enough that you're having to rely on Pac-Man interpreting what you want him to do by using the look command or by shooting something with a slingshot, but it's even worse when you take into consideration that the entire puzzle-solving element is also dependent on his mood. If Pac-Man is not in the right mood, then he won't necessarily do what you want him to. Want him to climb a rope? Well, if he's not in a good mood, then he doesn't have the strength to. He'll get about halfway up the rope and then just stop and then fall down. If his mood continues to deteriorate and he gets more and more depressed, then eventually he just won't listen to you at all, and he'll actually just stop moving entirely and just sit down and not do anything. And depending on what screens you're on, you may not necessarily be able to do something to get his mood back up. You may have to resort to using a power pellet, because that immediately puts him in a good mood, after he flies around as Super Pac-Man for a while and can potentially even fall to his doom when that expires, as I found out the hard way. And of course, this being a point-and-click style adventure game where it's got a lot of puzzles that need to be solved in a specific way, that can get really messy really quickly. So not only are you having to do the typical point-and-click adventure thing of just trying to figure out the solutions to puzzles that are going to be a bit obtuse and in some cases just downright ridiculous, but you're also having to deal with controls that are not precise and require Pac-Man to interpret what you actually want him to do. And you're even having to manage his mood on top of that. But even if you're doing those things, it doesn't always work. I've had so many instances where I try to get him to get the mountain flower in particular, and he just doesn't pick one up. And it doesn't matter what mood he's in or what I'm trying to do, he just doesn't pick up the flower, and I have no idea why. I'm guessing it's some weird glitch that I keep running into, but the rate at which I've run into that problem is high enough that it's particularly concerning. Now, of course, on the positive side, you have infinite continues, so you don't need to worry about getting a game over screen, but you can also soft lock yourself by, say, running out of power pellets for trying to manage his mood and then not having them when you need them, or him being in the wrong mood and then not being able to do anything about it, thus requiring you to restart the game, or him not having power pellets when the ghosts show up and just being screwed. And needless to say, that all gets rather frustrating, and thus, I've never finished Pac-Man 2 The New Adventures, and I probably never will, because even at the best of times the controls are a frustrating chore, and at the worst of times, the game just arbitrarily decides it doesn't want to function anymore. So there you have it, folks. Pac-Man 2 The New Adventures. Maybe the SNES version doesn't have that glitch, in fact I hope it doesn't, but if it does, then that would make the SNES version just as frustrating as the Genesis version. And even if it doesn't have that glitch, it would still be a frustrating mess that I really can't recommend to anybody unless you're just a die-hard Pac-Man fan and you just want it for collecting purposes. In which case, at least it's a pretty cheap one to find these days. Or at least it is as of the time I'm recording this video. Who knows if it's the future by the time you're watching this and prices have gone up dramatically, but as I'm recording this, you can get a copy of it for about $5 or so. But even then, I really don't recommend Pac-Man 2 The New Adventures, or Hello Pac-Man as it's known in Japan. It's just not good at all. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in later videos.